Launch is scheduled for September 10th at 12:01 Central Time, September 11th, 2:01 Japan time. This will be the first flight of the H-IIB rocket. There's a flight control team at the launch site in Tanegashima that's responsible for monitoring the rocket performance. The HTV flight control team in Tsukuba, Japan will take over after final separation of HTV from the rocket about 15 minutes into its flight. 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the flight, 2 of the 4 solid rocket boosters will separate. 3 seconds later, the other 2 separate. 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the flight, the fairing that protects HTV during launch will separate and fall away. 5 minutes and 54 seconds into the flight, the first stage will separate. At this point, HTV will have reached an altitude of 287 kilometers. 15 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, the second stage, which is the final stage of the rocket, will separate. At this point, HTV is flying with its own propulsion system, and communications will be established with the ground teams. On flight day 1 after launch, the flight control team will do a series of activation and checkouts with the vehicle. 7 hours into flight, it'll begin its initial phasing to the International Space Station. On flight day 2, it'll continue its far-field rendezvous, and the teams will do an extensive checkout of its absolute and differential GPS system. Flight day 3 has a number of demonstrations. These are all kind of tests and checkouts of safety critical and key features that we need for further on in the mission. The demonstrations we'll be doing are 2 active aborts. We also call these collision avoidance maneuvers, or CAMs, 2 passive aborts, and then check out of their backup computer, which is the abort computer unit, or ACU. Flight days 4 and 5, on board, the crew will finish up their final onboard proficiency training. On flight day 6, we'll have a special IMMT on the ground to review all of that demonstration and system performance data. On flight day 7, the crew will finish final onboard preparations for the capture, including setting up the robotic workstation, video, laptops. They'll route a hardware command panel that they use to control HTV. Flight day 8 is the actual capture. HTV will make its final approach, and then the crew will do the capture. This next video clip that I have shows you the flight day 8 activity starting from HTV's approach. The morning of flight day 8, HTV arrives behind ISS. It goes to a point about 5 kilometers away, and then it holds for an orbit and does a number of final system checkouts. It'll then move directly below ISS for approach along the R-bar. It stops at 300 meters to perform a 180-degree yaw-around maneuver, and this will position HTV for contingency abort maneuvers in case they're needed in close proximity to ISS. From there, the vehicle begins approach. It stops at 30 meters, and then again at the capture point. Once it's at the capture point, the crew will confirm that HTV is controlling in the right volume, and then they'll command HTV to free drift and bring the station arm in for the capture.
Launch of that first Japanese cargo vehicle to the International Space Station, scheduled for 12:01 Central Time this afternoon from the Tanegashima Space Center in southern Japan. Our NASA TV coverage of today's launch of the HTV will begin at 11:45 Central Time this morning.